happy to introduce myself. I'm a child neurologist by training in Toronto at Holland Bloomfield Kids Rehab. Actually, I was trainees with Dr. Bolduc together. So we were classmates when we were training back in Montreal. I studied neurodevelopmental conditions in general, both common and rare ones. I think about how genes affect brains and bodies and how the differences in our bodies and our brains impact our thinking skills, our behavior, our physical health, our mental health, and so on. And so I'm thrilled to be here because we have launched this new network that we call KINDtrials. And I think, let's see if this now works. Yeah, so see, there's animation in there now, but I put last minute, but I need to remember that I put it there. So KINDtrials is our new national clinical trials network that's dedicated to neurodevelopmental conditions that I ran with Dr. Murias and Dr. Balduc here that are on the screen and the rest of the team. And the idea here is that we are building a network of experts and sites and parents and families and advocacy organizations that represent both common and rare neurodevelopmental disorders. And we have a partnership with Fragile X Canada and with Karen, because obviously Fragile X is in the group of conditions that we think we can have an impact if instead of working separately, we work together. And the idea is that we would do trials that we design and we get federal and provincial funding for, but we would also bring industry trials into the space to give families as much access to as many different things as possible as they make decisions about how they would like to intervene in the kids' lives and what they prioritize for their kids. Because we know having a genetic difference, single genetic difference, like one genetic difference, does not mean that all the kids look the same. The kids look very different. They have different needs and families have different priorities. And we want to make sure that there are as many options available as possible to all families who share this genetic difference. So this is the map of Canada with the spots being all the sites where we actually have a site now for clinical trials. And our first study that we actually launched is this CALM study. So you'll see that we have sites in Alberta, we have sites in Ontario, we're trying to get Quebec going, and we have a site in Nova Scotia right now. The basic idea, and I'm going to move this black thing on the other side now, is that we're taking an area that is of common concern to families who have neurodevelopmental differences, including Fragile X, and we try to develop methods that allow us to test potential intervention across many conditions at the same time, so that we can get faster at getting answers for families and youth compared to what we used to do before, which was one condition at a time, one intervention at a time. So this is the first one. There are many different ways we can do this, but this is the first one that's going to run in this network. We picked anxiety, and I'll show you in a sec why, but you probably know why. It's a very common symptom that causes distress to kids and to families. It's shared across neurodevelopmental conditions, so it doesn't matter whether you have autism or Fragile X syndrome or a deletion in your 22q chromosome. Kids experience high levels of anxiety, and it really truly gets in the way of quality of life. So we know this is a shared concern for kids and families. And we are testing a new method that allows us to actually test a medication called sertraline, which is a common medication that neurotypical kids may use for anxiety across all of these conditions at the same time. Now, I'll get back to the graphic in a second, but I just want to highlight a couple of things. So we call it the CALM study, but it stands for Randomized Placebo-Controlled Trial of Sertraline versus Placebo in the treatment of anxiety for kids and adolescents who have neurodevelopmental conditions. And the reason I'm giving you this is not just to give you the mouthful, but there are some critical things that parents need to understand or youth need to understand about the study. First of all, it's randomized, meaning we will assign half the kids to take the medication, and the half the kids are going to get placebo, which is a sugar pill. And the way we make the decision about who goes where is random. So there is a random algorithm that decides when a next kid comes into the study, whether they're going to get randomized to the actual drug or whether they're going to get randomized to placebo. So that's the randomized part, the random. Placebo control means we use placebo. So half the kids will get a sugar, what we call a sugar pill, doesn't have sugar in it, but basically there's no medication in it. It looks the same, it feels the same, but in fact, there is no medication in it. And parents often ask us why we would ever do this to a kid. And the truth is that when we ran studies to understand whether a medication is particularly useful, especially for behavioral symptoms like anxiety, up to a third of the kids will get better even when they're on the placebo group. We call this the placebo effect. So being part of a study leads to some improvements, whether you take the medication or not. We can have a discussion about this if you're interested, but basically the idea is if we're gonna make a decision to put a child on medication, we better know that it works better than placebo, better than a sugar pill, because we know the sugar pill works a little bit. So we wanna make sure that if we're gonna make a strong recommendation at the end about what may work or not work, we can give you good evidence that it works better than a sugar pill, because all medications have side effects. No medication comes without side effects. So we want to be confident that the medication that we're going to make a recommendation on actually works for the specific population. Treatment of anxiety is the next part. So anxiety is our main target. We're going to measure a whole lot of other things. We're going to look at safety again. We're going to look at sleep. We're going to look at repetitive behaviors. We're going to look at a bunch of things that families have prioritized across the different conditions. But anxiety is the main reason we are running the study. And we're including kids and adolescents. So I'll get into the details of that in a sec. So this is why we picked anxiety. So we did a large study, a large participant engagement, patient engagement across many neurodevelopmental conditions several years back. We had people send us back their priorities of what they want researched. We started with something like 1,300 priorities, and then we worked over a period of a year to put things together in collaboration with families, and ultimately ended up with 30 top priorities for families. And then this group got together in person the last day, and we tried to actually come up with a top 10. And anxiety made it in the top 10 priorities of youth and families about where they would like us to spend money and resources to do research to find effective solutions. So this thing is going to drive you crazy now, so I'm going to keep moving it. So we talked about the randomized, we talked about the placebo control. The third keyword here is double blind. Double blind means that nobody knows what they're taking. So the families don't know what it is that the kid is taking. It could be the drug or the sugar pill, but we don't know either. So if you're hoping that your doctor could give you a hint, we don't know. We cannot give you a hint. And that is to make sure that we're totally objective when we measure whether something is working or not. Because as I said, we do see some improvements in kids when they go into trials, because you come and see us all the time and you're investing all this time. That's one reason. The other reason is, in fact, there is some evidence that just taking a sugar pill can temporarily at least improve symptoms. Really, not just the impression that something is getting better. The study lasts for 16 weeks, so that's 4 months. So the kids will be in the trial for 4 months. And as I said, we are looking at anxiety and quality of life. We're looking at how kids tolerate the medication. We're looking to see if there are any side effects that kids who have neurodevelopmental conditions have that neurotypical kids don't have, or whether they get them at a higher frequency. So our kids with neurodevelopmental differences like Fragile X tolerate the medication the same way that other kids handle the medication, or should we know something special about kids who have Fragile X, for example, when we think about safety and when we give parents advice about how to make these decisions? And then because we know that across all these developmental conditions and within Fragile X, although the kids share a genetic difference, we see lots and lots of differences. So some kids like certain medications, some kids really don't like the same medication, although they may have the same genetic difference. Some kids may get no side effects, some kids get a lot of side effects. We're trying to understand where all of this difference comes from, because ultimately, if this works, we want to be able to give parents good information that based on the characteristics of your child, this is what you can expect. Not some average child in some average study, but based on your child and their characteristics, we can make an individualized decision. So this is why we use biomarkers. We're trying to see how much serotonin you have in your blood, what are the genes that are important for how the drug is being metabolized, and also ANS, which is how your body reacts to stress. And I'll get into the details of this in a sec, whether these things predict whether you're likely to respond to the medication, and also what kind of side effects you may actually get. So by the end of the study, we can actually make these kinds of individualized recommendations to people. So this is where my slides are really ugly, because I made them last minute, because as I said, I cannot get into the hospital server right now, but they have the information. So I'll try to walk you through the things that you really, really need to know. We're trying to put in the study 130 kids across the country. We are probably going to recruit from your local population for every clinic, but sometimes we do national initiatives like we're doing now, where we're partnering with an organization that's an advocacy organization that actually represents the voices of the families, and we talk to the families directly. This looks really ugly, but it's important information. I want you to have it. I'll walk through the important things. Kids have to be 8 to 17 years old. So if you're not 8 quite yet, we have to wait until you have your 8th birthday to make you eligible for the study. 17 means 17, 11 months, and 30 days, right? Right before your 18th birthday, you're eligible for the study. The minute you have your 18th birthday, you will no longer be eligible for the study. It won't surprise you that if there was somebody, a teenage girl who was sexually active, we would try to make sure that there is no pregnancy that happens during a clinical trial. And no, that's not common for our population, but we always list it there. The kids have to have one of 6 conditions. They can have autism, ADHD, as I said, tic disorders, Fragile X, tuberous sclerosis, and 22q deletion. So for our conversation, Fragile X is the important one. And they also need to have anxiety, because that's what we're trying to make better. So kids, we have to document that there is enough anxiety that it's worth coming into the study. So sometimes because the study has been running now for a while, we see that kids will come in some of the sites and they will not meet criteria for the study, and parents are pretty upset. So we want to be clear what it is that we're trying in that kind of assessment. We're trying to make sure that the kids have enough anxiety that it's worth taking medication. We know medications have side effects. We don't want kids exposed if they don't have the right reason to take medication, right? People are asking us if there is an IQ cutoff or something like this. So what we're asking is what the reviewers for the grant, when it got reviewed, were able to agree with us. We're gonna measure cognitive skills, but we're not gonna use them as a decision point for whether to come into the study. The only thing we're asking is, because we're measuring anxiety, and anxiety is an internal experience. So we see behaviors that we are calling anxiety, but we're not totally convinced it's anxiety until we can get tiny bit of information from a kid. We're not expecting a lot of language, but we're expecting what we call phrase speech. So kids who can put two words together, and it's not just a single word that they communicate with or no words at all. It's not that the medication would not work similarly for kids who may not have any language. Is that in a clinical trial, we want to be sure that we're measuring something real. And so for anxiety, at least the reviewers, whether we agree or not, felt that we needed to even get a tiny bit of information directly from the kid, even if it means that the kid says, feel stressed, feel bad, something like that, to have a little bit of a phrase. And if you look at 7, we don't ask kids to come off their existing interventions and medications, but we expect the kids to be on stable interventions and medications, meaning we don't want to be changing too many things at a time. So if a kid were to come into the study, we say typically that their medication should be stable for about a month. And we're saying that if they're getting a lot of interventions right now, they should be relatively stable for about 3 months. We do use a lot of translators in our clinical trials, but we want some basic understanding of English for the forms that are being used during the study, or French if you're in Quebec. We can talk about this one. If this becomes an issue, we can actually change it. This was the original approval we received, but we can actually change this. It's important to also know what gets you kicked out of the study if you're a family. So again, I want families to know how to get into the study and also what things would actually not allow them into the study so they don't waste their time about this. And also, we're partnered with families, right? So if you get really mad about some of this stuff, you get to actually push back. We can make modifications. We'll tell you why some of the things are there. Sometimes we have control, sometimes we don't have control, but we would love to partner if you think that some of these rules are totally stupid and we need to actually do something about them. We are totally open to this. So this medication belongs to a class of medications called SSRIs. They include medications like Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, escitalopram, Lexapro. They all belong into the same class. If a kid was taking a very similar medication within the month, we would say don't come in, right? Because you still have more of that medication on board. So what's the point of we can really start from a baseline. If you had previous treatment with the same medication and you had taken a good dose and for a good enough time and it didn't work, we don't want you to get exposed to the same thing again, right? If you had a good, fair trial of that medication, we would not want you to get exposed just to be in the study, just to help us out with the trial. That would not make a lot of sense. If you tried 2 previous medications that are very similar and none of them worked, the third one is likely not to work too. So again, although we like kids in the study, we don't want to expose you to this medication if the chances that your child is going to respond is very low. So if the kid has failed 2 previous SSRIs, then we will say, don't take a third one. It's not worth it to your child. We would not do it clinically. So why would we do it for the study? In general, we say if the kids have a serious medical condition, this is not the time to be doing a trial. It is still a trial, right? We value trials. We want to do the right experiments to understand what works and what doesn't. But if your child has a serious medical condition and it's urgent care or intensive care, this is not the time to be part of a study. So you can have this conversation with a physician. We have not specified what we mean by serious because we want people to have flexibility to discuss what's reasonable for the family with their physician. But in general, it's still an experiment. We want to do the experiment. We want the kids in the study, but we want them to be at a place where their health is relatively good and they're safe and they have the opportunity to participate in an experiment. Hypersensitivity, which is 6, basically means an allergic reaction. If you had an allergic reaction before to this drug, please don't take it again. I know it makes sense, but we have to write it down. Number 7 is very unlikely to happen, but we put it down because those 2 medications actually interact in a way that's very unsafe. Now, it's very unlikely because we don't use them a lot in Canada in this population. So I don't expect to see it. But if for some reason a kid was on those medications, the interactions are not safe and we should not be exposing you to this medication. And then 8 and 9 have to do with medications that actually cause a little bit of arrhythmia in the heart, a change in the way in the safety of the heart in our heart health. So if the kids are on medications, we increase the risk of a heart event or an arrhythmia, we would not take them into the study. Number 10 is weird, I know, but that is, I told you, some things we have control, some things we don't. Number 10 is a mandatory requirement from Health Canada, and that exact sentence lives at every clinical trial protocol we write. It's not because we make any assumptions, it's because it's a mandatory part of any Health Canada approved protocol. We do have to monitor safety, and that requires 2 blood tests. So if a family told us there is 0 chance you're going to get a blood test from my child, even when we support you, we distract you, we give you, we put EMLA, we play with the kids, we allow them to use their devices, we use every trick on the trade. But if a family says there is no way you're going to get blood, probably you should not be exposed to the clinical trial. The next one is the controversial one, and I know it came as a question. In this particular study, we only have capsules. We don't have liquid. I want to explain it so you know why this decision was made. It is not it's a pragmatic, practical decision. But when I talk to families, I want them to be partners in research and understand the kinds of problems we also face when we try to put a protocol together. So for Health Canada to approve a trial and to make sure that it's under, they can guarantee the safety of a trial, they actually monitor, there are special rules about manufacturing, and they actually monitor the manufacturing process of these drugs. So we cannot just do what we do clinically. Sometimes clinically, we'll say, take the capsule, open it up, put it in liquid, and have your kid drink it. In this case, we have to, first of all, protect the integrity of the capsule. Secondly, remember, because it's placebo-controlled, so half the kids are going to get the drug and half of the kids are going to get placebo, there is a capsule in a capsule to protect the blinding of the study, the fact that nobody knows what the kids are on. And that was the most practical way we could do it. There is the liquid formulations that you can get clinically are not stable for more than 2 weeks. You cannot manufacture a supply for the whole study if it's going to expire in 2 weeks. So it is the only safe way we can do it for the purpose of the trial right now. So for this study, unfortunately, it is a capsule. The kids have to swallow it, which we know will leave some kids behind who cannot swallow pills at all. Again, we can have this conversation specifically if it becomes a huge problem for the Fragile X population, but I want you to know why we're in this situation. There is no liquid that's actually made as a liquid that's stable to stay on your cell for a long time. The only way to make the sertraline liquid is to compound it, and that has a half-life, that has a shelf-life of a couple of weeks. So we cannot produce the supply for the study if we were to put it in liquid. And of course, we don't want you to be part of 2 experiments at the same time, right? So one experiment at a time if we're going to do experiments. And so you can only be in one intervention research study. You can be in as many research studies as you like if they don't have an intervention on your kid. But we want just one intervention at a time. This is the better way to see if something works, but it's also the safest way. We don't want to have the experience of random interventions interacting with each other in ways that can produce safety concerns for kids. So what does sertraline, so what we think sertraline does, sertraline we think treats anxiety mostly and a little bit of mood, but our interest here is in anxiety because we know these kids and these families have prioritized anxiety as a target. What are the potential side effects? It can cause a little bit of a headache, it can cause a bit of an upset stomach, it can cause a bit of dry mouth as the dose goes up. Some kids may also get loose stools. So in general, there's a little bit of gastrointestinal side effects. They tend to not be severe, but kids get them. And that's why we start at a very low dose and we build it up. We can also, in this study, we're allowed to back off on the dose if side effects come. So we start at a small dose, we're increasing the dose. Let's say the kids are doing well, but we see a bit of an effect in anxiety, but not enough. So you make a decision with the doctor to keep increasing the dose. And then when you made another increase, now they have side effects you don't like upset stomach or a bit of diarrhea, for example, or loss of appetite. You can actually make the decision with your doctor to come down on the dose to the previous dose that was working without a lot of side effects. Some kids can get a little sleepy. Some kids can get a little bit of insomnia. So we can play with the dose to be given morning or night and so on to deal with these issues. Occasionally, you'll see some dizziness. Sexual dysfunction is an interesting one, but I won't not talk about it because what happens is with the teenage boys, if they see their body being different, they can get quite upset, especially if they don't understand what's happening. So if they understand that this could happen, so basically the sexual dysfunction you get with these medications is that the boys can get more prolonged erections. So a child that can talk about this, we explain it. We say that the medication, it's not dangerous, it's not harming you, but it will feel different. But for the kids who cannot communicate and cannot speak, I make sure that especially for the teenage boys, that the families know that this may happen. Again, it's not dangerous, it doesn't cause harm, but it may cause distress to the child if they feel that their body is different. So that's one sexual side effect. The second one that applies to all kids and adolescents, but somehow most people don't care about it, but I also report it just in case, is that there could be a bit of a decrease in libido. So as the adolescents experience sexual feelings, those may get dampened a little bit by the medication. It doesn't cause harm or long-term harm. It's just a different experience of their body. Some kids may get a little bit of a tremor. Up to 5% of kids get something called agitation or disinhibition, especially when they have neurodevelopmental conditions. So I expect we will get this. I expect that 1 in 20 kids or so in the trial may experience some agitation and disinhibition. We can back off on the dose for this one, or we can just take them off the study, and we can do both, depending on what the family and the clinician want to do. The last one, I put it there because parents will freak out when they go on Google, on Dr. Google. So if you search the drug or the whole class of the anti-anxiety medications and the antidepressants, you will always see that there is something called a suicidality warning or an FDA black box warning on the website. The reason I'm smiling is not because I think this is funny. There's nothing funny about it. It's just that in our population, it's of not particular relevance. This is not something we see. In kids who are adolescents and have a lot of good thinking skills, I still give them a heads up. Although most of the evidence is in kids who had significant depression, and suicidality comes with depression, right? Sometimes. And so there is a debate about this. I'm just going to tell you what the debate is. The data is a little bit shaky, but it does look like you improve energy before you improve mood in the depressed adolescents. And so for those of them who thought life was not, think about the typical population. You have an adolescent that is experiencing, unfortunately, a major depressive event. If you improve their energy before you improve their mood, there is kind of a risk window there where they still feel pretty bad, but now they have the energy to do something about it. That's one theory about this. In general, in our population, it's very low, but we actually examined that during the study. So on every visit, we ran a questionnaire about this to make sure that if any such feelings were to show up, we would be managing them appropriately. Again, I personally, in my clinical practice, always talk about this because I want to normalize the conversation because this is life, real life, right? And real life kids have thoughts, lots of thoughts. And sometimes they can tell us about their thoughts, and sometimes they cannot tell us about their thoughts. But I think the more we openly talk about stuff without making a, talking about the difficult things without making people feel that it's a special thing. It's like an everyday thing, the same way that I ask about belly aches and sleep problems, the same way I talk about their anxiety or muscle issues. I talk about this too. It's just part of life, part of our health, and we just normalize the experience of that. Okay, I'm not going to get into the details of the dosing procedures. The idea here was we start low and we can build up and then we can back off anytime we want based on the experience of the child and the family. And this is a little bit of a crazy one, but look, you can look across the 16 weeks. The idea is that you can do up to 3 of these visits virtually. So we're trying to minimize how much you have to come in, but you do have to come in when you're getting screened to see if you meet criteria. At the first visit, when you actually get randomized, your baseline visit, where we get all the measures to see what you're starting with, about halfway, and at the end has to be in person. And then in between, we have the flexibility for doing virtual visits. And then, as I said, we're going to take some extra things from you to just be able to give guidance to families at the end of the study that is more personalized. So when we take the blood for safety, we also take some extra blood to look at serotonin levels, which is this hormone that this drug is actually trying to target. We're going to ask the kids if they can spit to give us a little bit of spit to actually see whether certain genes can help us tell you whether your child is likely to respond to medication or not. And then this autonomic nervous system thing that we talked about is we're sending kids home with a watch at the beginning of the study and at the end of the study that they have to wear for 2 weeks. And we see how their body regulates, right? How hyper-aroused they may be or how calm they may be. We look at the patterns of regulation, and then we will examine whether wearing a watch for a couple of weeks can help us predict if a child is likely to respond to this medication or not. So if we can find any markers that say these kids are not likely to respond, then we want to be able to use them then after clinically for guidance and say, don't expose your child to this medication, although it's widely used, because they are very unlikely, it's very unlikely that they will respond. I think this is the last slide I had. And again, I apologize for the not pretty slides, but they're deep somewhere, our server, and we can't get into it today. So that's where we are. So the study is running. It's going to run all the way to the end of next summer. So the last time that we can take a new child into the study would be next May. So we have lots of time for kids to turn 8 and for other kids to come in between now and next May. What we're hoping to do by the end of it is to get a good sense of whether this medication that's used in typically developing kids actually works for all the different groups that we talked about. We may have definitive answers for some of the groups. If we don't have a definitive answer for one of or 2 of the groups, the plan is that then we will use this data for the follow-up trial that will become the definitive trial for that specific group. So for a Fragile X, if we get enough kids, we may have a definitive answer by next summer, or we may have enough data to say to the funders that there is good enough evidence here to have the definitive answer. We want to continue, give us some extra money, and then continue to produce a definitive answer for that particular group. So I may stop here, and we can maybe talk about some questions. And then, of course, we can answer questions at any time, whether it's this talk, this time or a different time. Karen is a good, Fragile X Canada is a good partner, but also will circulate the information for the local center for everybody, depending on your address, where you can actually call us and we can go through all the information in a more tailored way, a more specific way to your child and see whether for your child that may be a good fit or not.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing this great overview. I think it's going to help a lot of families make some decisions and hopefully, proceed further, even if it's just asking more questions.
Yeah.
I think one thing that really came through and you made so clear is that your genuine commitment to keeping the best interest of the child and the family at the center of this work, which is something that we value at Fragile X Canada, but I think parents value as well. And we could really see that coming out. So thank you so much. And I really appreciate that ongoing dialogue that you and your team have fostered in that, clear focus on safety, transparency, and support going forward. So we have received some questions of some people ahead of time. So maybe I can kind of start with that. And then if anyone here wants to add into some of those questions. So it was a great explanation that you had about why it's only in pill form and not liquid. So I appreciate that. I actually learned quite a bit in you sharing that as well. So one of the questions that we also had is talking about logistics and travel. So I know we have quite a few sites across Ontario. In Alberta, we have Calgary and Edmonton, Nova Scotia. How do families get engaged? Do they get coordinated travel, their expenses covered? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, this is not an industry-sponsored trial. This is a trial that has been put together with federal and provincial funding and led the foundation. So I'm not going to lie again, pragmatic, good partnership conversations with families. It's not like we have an enormous budget for travel. You should contact your local site to see if they have a special budget outside of the trial that can accommodate. But usually what's covered is either mileage and parking or parking and public transportation, depending on the city that you are in. So parking and reasonable travel would be covered by the study. But for example, as a study, we don't have money for flights and things like that. We wish we would, but we don't. Having said that, I think everybody should call their local site if you're interested, because sometimes local sites will have other types of arrangements that are possible that may not be covered by the study.
Fabulous. One other question we had that came in as well is talking about follow-up care and future care. So once this study is done, are individuals going to know which they were on? And then is there any potential for ongoing
Yeah.
opportunities?
So very good question, right? So the study finishes at the point of the 16-week time point where you have actually been exposed to either drug or placebo for 16 weeks. At that point, we do break the blind and we tell you what you were on, provided you want to know. But we actually would like you to know, because if you are on the drug, we have to actually make a plan. So there are a couple of different possibilities here. If we break the blind and the child was on the drug, if this really worked for them, now they've been stable on a dose for at least a month based on our protocol. So we would transfer care to your primary care physician, whoever that person is, to just continue at the same dose. So like if we got you to a good dose and you like what you see, we will help your physician to take over from us and continue the same kind of care. And we have procedures in place so you don't have a gap or anything else or anything like that. If you were on the medication and you didn't like it, it didn't work for you. It just finished, and it has you thought you were on placebo, but you were on drug, right? Then the study physician typically will help you come down slowly from the medication before you get transferred to your physician's care. So we'll make sure that we can get it down safely and that you tolerate the coming down, and then before you get it transferred back to your physician. If you were on the sugar pill, it's a little tricky, the answer, because different sites will do different things. So I'll give you a sense of what's happening around the country, And then you need to call the local site again to get the specific information. But if you're from Alberta, we have the two Alberta physicians here from Calgary and Edmonton, and they can answer. So depending on the capabilities of the site, a variety of things can happen. In some sites, we have offered to offer clinical care for a period of 4 months, up to 4 months, so that everybody has a chance to try it with the same team, if it's at all possible, before they go back to their clinician. But that's not possible for all sites. For some sites, you may get offered the ability to try for a little bit and transfer to the family, your primary care physician sooner. And in some sites, your trial physician will talk to your primary doctor, or for the primary doctor to start the medication if that's what you want to try. So there is different versions of this. It would be very good to speak to the local doctor to figure out what the options may be for you, because we know that it's hard sometimes when the kids are on the sugar pill and they really wanted to try the real thing. Again, I will be transparent and pragmatic, so we're all in one partnership here. Sometimes we get big budgets and we can offer what we call an open label extension, meaning that the kids everybody could try the real thing at the end and know that they're trying the real thing. And sometimes we don't get them. And in this particular circumstance, we did not get a budget for an open label extension. And that's why every site is making a different decision depending on their capabilities. But we want to make sure that you have a plan from the beginning before you get into the study that you're comfortable with about what will happen at the end if you happen to get the sugar pill.
Excellent. Sounds great. Well, we're gonna get close to stopping the recording just so that we can have some more informal conversations where everyone feels comfortable asking some more questions. I will say that I am honored to serve as one of the 3 co-chairs for the patient engagement and knowledge translation team for the KIND Clinical Trials Network. I think this is a really great national initiative that, you touched on there, and it really helps us focus on improving access to and designing clinical trials for neurodevelopmental conditions. And hopefully we can get that ball rolling even further and get a little bit more investment in that trials network so that we can see that. But before I do close things off, we had a great opportunity to hear you speak, Dr. Agnastu. Why don't we just let our 2 leads in Alberta that are here, Dr. Balduc and Dr. Miriaz, maybe say an introduction. We do recognize it's in July and it was hard to get a lot of people together, but we will identify who the site leads are across Ontario, Alberta, Nova Scotia, and any other places that I did miss. So families can get a hold of either myself or those clinical leads for any other further questions or engagement that they might have. So, Dr. Balduc, did you want to say a quick hello and introduce yourself?
I just wanted to say a big thank you to Evdokia for including us into this. She really pushed hard and got extra funding and managed to get our Alberta sites involved with this project. And I think we showed we can punch above our weight when it came to the metformin trial. We had a lot of people that came together, and we didn't have an organized network and all that. So I think we can do this. I know a lot of families, thanks to Kara and people we worked with, have way better management of anxiety than they did when we 5 years ago. So that's a great thing. And if you're like, unfortunately, I'm already on a treatment for that, that's okay. But you probably know, a couple of other families or people from your family own family members that have Fragile X, that have not been part of the metformin trial or not been seen in the last few years. So we need you guys to kind of reach out and talk to each other. The timeline, if Doka said we have a lot of time, but we don't actually have a lot of time. So we really need to get people on board quickly and get enrolled, and contact us. Our research coordinator will go through everything with you. So like if Doka said, Dr. Dr. Adnagnos too. Sorry, she calls me Dr. Waldrick, so I should call you Dr. Adnagnos.
No, please don't actually. Yeah, I'm uncomfortable when I'm called
You
that.
have to call me Francois then. Anyway.
Francois, it is, and Cara, yes.
Otherwise, it sounds like you. Anyway, but seriously, we really need people to talk to each other, communicate, and reach out to us like people did before. And we'll screen every kind of potential issues that they could be, so that you don't come here for nothing. Unlike the metformin clinical trial, this trial is much more of a small budget, and so we won't be able to cover plane or hotels and stuff like that. So we want to make sure people come here for and they'll be involved with the trial. This medication is used already a lot. You know, it's not been studied, but it's being used. So I think in terms of safety, that's not going to be a major issue, but this is going to be like making sure we meet the inclusion criteria to make sure we have, you know, enough anxiety diagnosis and so on and so forth, so that people can do that. So if you're not sure, just give us a call, and Kenisha, who's here, and Jacob, who's not able to attend tonight, but will be there. We'll be able to answer. So, and again, thank you, Karen, for setting this up.
Yeah, I'll echo that. It's nice to have the opportunity to talk about research, because once I get started talking about research, I can never stop. But I am very excited to be part of the KINDtrials, partly because it will help support different trials into new treatments and innovative things and more options for families. And I think that's fabulous. But I also am very happy for the KINDtrials for clinical trials like this, where it'll give us evidence to be, as physicians, to be a lot more confident in the decisions and the recommendations that we can give to families. I do already prescribe sertraline for anxiety in the context of neurodevelopmental disorders, but I do that with a bit of reluctance and with the full knowledge and have to counsel the families that we don't have a lot of evidence for a lot of the things that we do in neurodevelopmental conditions that we offer to families, and both having more evidence to make those suggestions, but also, like Evdokia talked about, having some new evidence in trying to pick the best treatment for specific kids rather than just as groups. I think this study and KINDtrials in general is I have a lot of energy and hope to be able to do more of that stuff. So just like Francois said, if you're not sure if you qualify, give us a call. We can, especially for local families, try to work with you. So for instance, like not being able to take pills, we do have a program for Child Life to help kids learn how to take pills. And if it comes up for this trial, but also, you know, in life, it's usually a good thing to be able to swallow pills when you need them. We can work with Child Life and go through the program and help them learn to swallow pills. It might not work for everybody, but that might be an added benefit for different families. And while we hope to get as many of the families with Fragile X involved, we also know that there's good communities of families within these different conditions too, right? So if you have friends and families who are affected by autism or ADHD or those other conditions, we're happy to hear from all of those families and work with them on whether or not it's safe for them, it's acceptable, and it's the best interest of the child, like Karen said, but also if we can help around some of those logistical difficulties too.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, I want to sincerely thank all of you guys and the research team for sharing your time with us today, your knowledge and commitment to keeping families and children at the heart of this work. And, you know, I think to the families who joined us, who are interested, who couldn't join us, who are going to be watching this later, I want to thank you, you know, that your curiosity and questions that were submitted ahead of time and willing to engage in these sessions really help move forward research and, you know, in a really human-centered way as well. And I think an important point, like Kara had mentioned, where participating in clinical trials is not just about accessing new treatments, it's also about helping shape the future of care. And, you know, for others who walk in this path and may not have an opportunity to do that. So each question we asked here and going forward is a voice that is being heard by everyone, as you can tell, and making those decisions to participate. So Thank you again for being a part of this conversation. We look forward to sharing more information, getting more people involved and engaged, and filling up those trials so that we can get some good information going forward. So thank you so much, and I will stop the recording.